Personal injury cases are money grabs.
My insurance company will take care of me.
Lawsuits take years and are emotionally draining.
In an injury case, you have to go to court all the time.
Lawyers are just vultures who are after money.
Today we want to break down 7 myths regarding personal injury cases and debunk them to hopefully save you some frustration and make your case a little bit easier if you happen to have a personal injury case. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Williams Ellaby YouTube channel. I'm Joel, this is Chase from the law firm of Williams Ellaby. So, Chase, what's number 1?
The number 1 myth that we're going to debunk today is that PI cases or personal injury cases are just money grabs. That's simply not true. Yeah, there's money at the end of most cases because that's just the way the system is set up, right? Civil cases, the only way we can compensate someone for a loss is through monetary means, money. Criminal cases, you go to prison, you have jail time, you have community service, things like that. Now, of course, if you'd ask all of our clients, would they rather have, not gotten the injury or have to get, money, they would always say not get the injury. Money just happens to be the only thing that is available to compensate someone for an injury.
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 because the only thing that we can ask for under the law is money.
That's right.
And then that's what people get upset about is you ask for money for an injury. But what I think a lot of people fail to understand is that it's not like the insurance company just backs up the brink truck to you whenever you make a personal injury claim.
That's right.
You have to prove it. You got to prove why you're entitled to a certain amount of money. You got to prove what your medical bills are. You got to prove what your lost wages are. You have to prove any lost profits. You have to prove all of these different things. And then you also have to demonstrate what the pain and suffering and all these intangible things you've gone through are worth. Because they don't just say, you don't just call it up and say, hey, Mr. Ellaby Insurance Company, I hurt my neck, you need to pay me $1 million. That is not how it works, not even close. So even though money is involved, yes, absolutely, it is not a money grab. It is an attempt to compensate somebody for something that they have lost because we can't put them back together. All we can do is try to provide some sort of compensation for them when they have that loss.
That's right. And you kind of bring up the next one we're going to talk about. We talk about insurance companies. So what's the second myth?
My insurance company will take care of me. We have so many clients who once believed this. For I don't know how many times we have gotten phone calls where somebody has called us just to get part of our free consultations and kind of pick our brains, which is fine. And we like for people to do that. And they say, well, I think my insurance company is going to take care of me. I'm just going to handle it myself. Almost always we get a call back 2-3 months later. Hey, they're only offering me this. Can you guys step in?
Right.
Well, yes, we can. But what people have to realize is that insurance companies are not charitable organizations. They're not companies that operate outside of the for-profit business model that American companies largely operate under. They are in business for profit. Many of them have stockholders they have to answer to. Some mutual companies have members that they have to answer to. And really what it comes down to is what their bottom line is. And they want to charge as much for their premiums as they can and stay competitive with other insurance companies, but really they want to pay out the least amount possible. So if they know that 9 out of 10 people will take $100 for a $500 injury, then they're going to pay $100 for a $500 injury all day long.
That's right.
So they're not just going to give you money. You have to bring the case, you have to prove your case, you have to do everything necessary to help them understand they really have no choice but to fully compensate you for whatever the loss is that you have.
Yeah, that's right. I always say that insurance companies are in the business of collecting premiums and denying claims. And it's very rare that a potential client will call us up and say, hey, the insurance company's offering me X, what do you think about that? It's very rare that I say, well, that's not too bad, because like Joel said, they're not going to back up the Brinks truck to you and give you all the money that you ask for because that's just simply not their business model. So you have to fight to get what's fair. So,
but in fairness, that has happened.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it has. Absolutely.
That has happened before, but it's definitely the exception to the rule.
That's right.
All right, number 3.
The third one is that if you file a lawsuit, that it'll take years and years and years for the case to get resolved. Now, generally speaking, every topic we're going to discuss, it really just depends, but it's not always the case that lawsuits take years and years and years. Some of them do. It just depends on the type of case, it depends on the court, it depends on a lot of different factors. But most of the time when you file a lawsuit, that case is going to get resolved before you actually go to trial. Trial is when you actually have to go to court, you pick the jury, you're there for a week, put on evidence. We got plenty of videos on trials and things like that, but it's not always the case that it's going to take years. Now, of course, it happens, and it can be extremely draining, and it can be frustrating, can be emotional, but that just sort of kind of comes with the territory, and really, again, just depends on the type of case that you have.
Yeah, and the vast majority of cases that we handle settle before trial.
Right.
A lot of them settle before a formal lawsuit is even filed.
That's
like
right.
We're able to negotiate a settlement before the case ever enters the lawsuit stage.
Yeah.
But there are those cases where, for whatever reason, you as the claimant or our clients and us cannot come to an agreement with the other side's insurance company or the other side about a liability issue or a causation, meaning did this cause these damages, or a monetary issue, what are these damages worth, that causes some issues that force us into litigation and into trial. But maybe 5% of the cases we have actually go to trial.
Yeah, I'd say if that, more likely than not, the case gets resolved before having to file a lawsuit. And definitely more likely than not, the case gets resolved before you have to go to trial, once that lawsuit's been filed. Yeah, it's a very, very small percentage that you actually have to go to trial. But again, you can kind of toil in litigation for years, and that, again, depends on a bunch of different factors, including the complexity of the case and things like that. But yeah.
Yeah, and how fast the judge will give you a court date.
That's right. We had a case one time where we were supposed to try a case, and the other side was looking for a continuance, meaning to push the case to the next trial calendar, and it would have been literally another year until that court's next available trial calendar. We're like, no way, can't do that. So yeah, fortunately, we were able to try that case, but it can be a long time.
Yep. Myth number 4 is that when you file a case, you have to go to court all the time. That's not true. There are certain times during a case that you will have to be, if you're the one bringing the claim, that you'll have to be actively involved. Mm-hmm. The first one is for what we call a deposition, and that's where the lawyers will ask you questions about the event that you're bringing the claim for, about your injuries, about any pre-existing injuries you have, what your damages are, all of that kind of stuff. And that is so that they have a fair opportunity to know what you're going to say before trial. Really, the only other time that you as a claimant would have to go to court would be for trial.
Right.
It's very rare that the person bringing the claim has to show up in a courtroom until the date of trial, because the deposition doesn't even take place in the courtroom. It takes place usually at a lawyer's office or by Zoom. Since 2020, we do a lot of them by Zoom. But to think that you're going to have to be in court all the time doing all this, it's not the case. Your lawyer may have to be in court several times for motions or things that need to be taken up with the judge, but very, very rarely does the actual claimant, the plaintiff, or the defendant for that matter, have to be in court unless a trial is going on.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say too. Going to court means a lot of things. Because I could ask the question, I know you do a lot, like, do you go to court a lot? And it really just depends. Going to court could be a simple status conference with the judge to say, hey, what's going on with this case? You guys need more time in discovery, whatever it might be. And of course, our clients don't have to go to that, or it could be arguing a motion and things like that. And then of course, when most people say go to court, they mean go to actual trial. And we just talked about that, how that doesn't really happen that often. So, yeah.
That's number 5.
So number 5 is that lawyers are just the vultures and they take all the money. Insert scary lawyer noise. That is absolutely not true, and there's never been a case that I've ever worked on or handled that we've ever gotten more money than the clients have been compensated for their case. So that's just not how it works. Most personal injury lawyers that do what we do get paid on a contingency basis, and the contingency is basically a percentage of the total compensation that our client gets. And there's a handful, I know we've done videos on contingency fee agreements and contracts and things like that, but there's a handful of reasons why that's the case. The number one reason being that most folks don't have the means to pay a lawyer a $10,000 retainer fee, $500 an hour to work on a case. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, and I'll say this, just like any profession, there are bad apples within the legal profession. But the vast majority of lawyers are not the kind that are just going to take a case to increase their business, right? Yes, we're running businesses. Yes, we're for-profit businesses, but we also have reputations, and we have to show up in our communities every day, and we have to show up amongst our peers, our neighbors, our friends, the judges that we appear before, and have a reputation that we put our clients ahead of ourselves. And part of that has to do with the compensation that our clients get, because if clients are out writing all over Google or writing all over whatever review site, well, my lawyer took all the money, I got nothing, we're not going to be in business very long, right? So we always try to make sure that the client's interest is ahead of our own. And sometimes, to be frank with you, that means we actually reduce our fee beyond what was previously agreed upon, so the client gets more than we get. It's just the nature of how the business works.
Well, that and two, and we talked about it earlier, but there's been certain times we've gotten calls from clients that are in relatively small cases. Insurance companies offer them a certain amount of money, and I've just flat out told them, like, you're better off to accept that than to hire me. Yeah, I can get you more, but there's a fee that's involved when you hire me, and at the end of the day, you're going to be probably better off just not doing that, or not hiring me because of that fee that's associated with the case. So,
yep. All right, number 6 is that injury claims always result in a huge payout.
You don't want a huge payout.
No, you don't.
That's what I always tell people.
You are jacked up. You are hurt.
You don't want
if that happens.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that is precipitated by advertising that some law firms do, where you'll see a billboard that'll say $12 million settlement, or there'll be a TV commercial that says, we recovered this, or you'll see a billboard that says, put our army up against their army, or whatever. The truth of the matter is that almost every case where a big payout happens, there has been a big injury, a significant injury. And by significant, I mean, if you're talking $1 million plus, I'm talking about permanency, like something that's going to affect somebody the rest of their life.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills.
Surgeries, all this kind of stuff. We're not talking about cases where it's a bumper tapper and somebody's neck is sore for 2 weeks and they go to the chiropractor a couple times and they're fine. Those are the cases where Chase is mentioning earlier that he says, you know what, if the insurance company offers you a couple $1,000, you might want to just take it and don't worry about hiring.
Right.
But there's a little bit of, I don't know what's the right word for it, there's a little bit of coyness with some of these personal injury lawyer advertisements where they'll say $3 million for a neck injury or $5 million for a leg injury. Well, what it doesn't tell you is this a neck surgery? Is this a broken neck? Is this a sore neck? Is this a broken leg? Is this a bruise on the leg? Because if you get $5 million for a bruise on your leg, you got a better lawyer than me, because
Never heard of it. Never heard of
I haven't either.
Right.
But $3 million, when somebody has to cut a hole in your neck and then remove part of your spine and replace it with artificial disc material and put a titanium cage around it, yeah, that's probably worth $3 million.
Right.
But we have to know the circumstances that we're dealing with when we're talking about what the payout is. So, if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, Joel, I've got a neck injury where I've had to get an injection in my neck, and also I broke my nose because the airbag came out and broke my nose in this wreck. Am I going to get a big payout?" Well, my answer is I don't know until I know how the wreck happened. Is it the other person's fault? Do I know whether the other person has enough insurance to cover all of your injuries? Do I know whether your injury is going to be long-lasting or permanent and affect you the rest of your life? Because if it's all their fault, and if they have a lot of insurance, and if this is something that's going to affect you the rest of your life, and if the doctor is willing to testify that it's going to affect you the rest of your life, and if you're not in a county where 95% of the people vote for political candidates that hate lawsuits, maybe you get a big payout.
Oh yeah, right.
There's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts
that's
that go
exactly
along
right.
with it, right? So
many
it's
factors.
not as simple as just saying, hey, I hurt my neck, I deserve $3 million, because that's just not how it works.
Right, because there's no one case is the same. You know, there's no like, oh, well, this is exactly like this one I handled here, so you're guaranteed to get this amount. If any lawyer ever says they can guarantee you any result, that should be a huge red flag.
You should run as fast as
run
possible
for the
the other
hills.
way.
Run for the hills. So,
Yeah.
all right. So the last myth we're going to debunk is the myth that I don't need a lawyer, I can handle the case myself. Now, we've talked a little bit about that in some small circumstances, absolutely. But let a lawyer that you trust and maybe has been recommended to you tell you that, as opposed to you assuming that you can handle it yourself. If you're watching this video and if you've gotten this far in this video, you are proactive in doing research and trying to figure out if you can handle things on yourself or by yourself, which is great. But at some point, you need to call, you need to speak to a professional, you need to see whether or not it is in your best interest to hire a lawyer, because there's so many factors to consider other than just, hey, I'm hurt, can you pay me for my medical bills or pay me for my pain and suffering?
Yeah, if you're going to do it, if you're going to consider doing it yourself, know this. Let's just say a regular, as simple as it gets, car wreck case. You need to know how to make an open records request. You need to know how to get a police report, a 911 call, a body cam footage. You need to know how to get certified medical records. You need to know how to get your medical bills, how to organize those bills, how to write a proper demand letter prior to a lawsuit. And then if you get into a lawsuit, you got to know how to draft the lawsuit, how to do interrogatories, request for production, request for admissions, how to take depositions, what evidence is admissible, what evidence is not admissible. You have to know whether you can find out what you're trying to recover from, like how much insurance is available.
Let's say, yeah, you got to know if you have if you have any resident relatives that you could get after. You got to find out how much liability coverage there is. You got to find out if the driver was driving their own car, someone else's car. Ton of different factors.
There's a lot of stuff. And then if you get to a mediation, you need to know how to conduct a mediation. If you get to a trial, you got to know how to pick a jury. You got to know how to do opening statements. You got to know how to ask direct questions, open-ended questions, cross-examination questions. You got to know how to deal with motions for directed verdicts, motions to dismiss, post-trial motions. All of these different things, it takes years to hone and perfect that. And a lot of lawyers never do perfect it.
Right.
I haven't perfected it yet. I feel like I've gotten better and better at it over the years. And I probably never will perfect it. But if you do take the avenue of trying to handle it yourself, just know there is a lot involved. And if you think it's going to be overwhelming or cause too much stress and anxiety, it's better off at least to schedule a free consultation with a personal injury lawyer, because 99% of personal injury lawyers will offer that free consultation. And then you can make the decision, okay, is this going to be too much for me to handle, or am I willing to go ahead and hire this attorney and pay them the contingency fee, which is normally going to be, in order to take that stress and anxiety off of myself.
Yeah, I was going to say, at a minimum, if you feel like you're going to handle it by yourself or that you can handle it by yourself, call and speak to a lawyer, get that free consultation, so at least you know what you're up against.
That's right.
Yep.
All right, well, hopefully this video has been helpful to you. It's opened your eyes wide open to some of the things that are involved in personal injury cases. But if it's been helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. If also hit that subscribe button, we sure would appreciate it. Otherwise, we will see you next week for a very special video on a trial that I and my friend Matt Stoddard recently had in Cobb County, Georgia, where it resulted in a $5 million plus verdict for a man that fell into a concrete pit. But stay tuned next week and you'll hear all about it.